Hey everyone, Sycra in here, and this month, rather than doing a psychological problems podcast, I asked my patrons what they would like to see, for a reward once a month. If they want to see a podcast or, I posed a bunch of different ideas, and the one that actually won out was a 1.5 hour drawing or painting with me doing commentary. So that's what I'm going to try. It's my first time really doing this, so forgive me if I suck, but I'll try and explain to you as I go how I'm thinking, and I think that's going to be the most important thing. And with that in mind, I may go a bit slow, so I'm going to be probably drawing a bit slower than I normally do, just so I can explain everything. So the first thing I did is I just found a royalty-free image of just whatever. I was searching for people and found this image, and I thought, okay, well, the good thing is, and one of the most important things, is that it's pretty high res. Like when you zoom in, there's a lot of detail, and that's really important. So I guess I'll do sort of a study, but maybe make some alterations. So that's the first thing, figure, okay, I'll do a study. And then next thing I'm looking at is really the composition. So do I want to do both figures or just one? I'm not really sure. I don't particularly like this composition too much because, it's very centered. Perhaps too much for my tastes. And you've got this triangle and this triangle shape. That's how I kind of see it. And then you've got this and this and then this. I'm actually much more interested in just this kid. So I'm probably going to focus on that, just, a triangle like that. And so I have my my page, and it's going to be a vertical composition, and the way I'm going to think about it, as I said, is like pretty much just a triangle. And so first thing I'm going to do is, I usually don't like to work in color at first, so I'm going to create or turn this into black and white. All right, fill it with white or gray, or it doesn't matter what color as long as there's no saturation. See, black doesn't make a difference, gray doesn't make a difference. And I set that layer mode, so I'm in Photoshop, I set that to color, and now it maintains all the values. So I can work with that. And I'm also going to keep the image fairly small at first, and the reason for that is it allows me to focus on the big picture and not the details. And finally, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this and take this selection and put it on this, so I kind of get a sense of where I want the composition on this image, and then I can sort of frame it better. So now this and this are the same ratio. That's just going to help me when I want to measure anything. But as I said before, I'm not going to keep super accurate with this in terms of like, oh, paint it exactly. I'm just going to change it as I see fit, but try and get at least study a bit in terms of values and things. So let's just go ahead and start. First thing I'm going to do, I'm going to change the background color so it's not white, and so it's sort of a mid-tone, probably something like that would be good. And then I'm just going to start with a drawing. So I'm just using a value that's a bit darker than, I probably should switch brushes because that one was lagging a lot. That's a bit darker than the current value of the page. And I'm going to block in like the basic, that triangle I was looking at, kind of want the head to be about this big. And the hand is around here. And this is really the just a rough lay-in of kind of where I want things, not necessarily like anything finished, just placement. So I'm also going to be translating it into, I suppose, my style, just because that's something I like to do these days. And what I tend to do is I tend to make the heads a bit bigger, and I tend to make the bodies a bit smaller. So I'm going to try and adjust that. For me, it's still conscious. It's a decision-making process that I have to think about, because I'm not like super... I'm still not super comfortable with my style, in the sense that I've been drawing in this way for, less than just a few years, maybe not even 2 years. Whereas I've been doing the studies where you're basically just copying a photo. I've done that for many, many years. So that's not an issue. So now I have to be mindful of things that are sort of getting changed based on this decision to do the style thing. So for instance, there's a triangle that appears here with the head and the back, and in this image it's this thing. And what I could do if I was doing this realistically is I look at this triangle, and try to make them match. But because I mentioned that I'm actually altering the proportions a bit, I can't do that anymore. So I have to think about things in relation to each other. So anyway, this is pretty good for a start. Now what I can do is really shrink the image and block in some of the larger forms that I see. So I guess that's good. So it's really important for me to be working very small at this stage, because as I said, I want to get the big picture. I just want to have the major forms, got this. And this is just one way of doing it. I'm not trying to preach a method of you should paint like this because this is the right way. It's just the way I'm doing it right now, and probably change, but that's fine. You've got to do things as you feel like it, I guess. And I'm trying to squint and see where the big shadow shapes are. So I notice there's a shadow shape under the chin. Gets a touch darker. Maybe that's too dark. The eyes get a bit darker. And there's a shadow under here. And there's a shadow there. So yeah, I'm really just squinting, and I'm trying to get the bigger shapes. I'm also gonna block out some of the background here, so I can work on the contour of this. Sorry, I'm struggling with words. I figured this might happen because I'm not very good at drawing and talking at the same time, but I hope it's not too bad. And yeah, okay, so something like that. And it's really hard to paint this at this scale. It's super small, so just have to understand that that's going to be an issue. All right, now I'm going to zoom it in a bit more, and now I have a much better view of where I'm going to paint this. But what I'm going to try and resolve early on, sort of any kind of compositional thing. So I notice there's like this dark thing here. I'm not sure if I want to use that or not, because I kind of want the focus to be here. So maybe it just gets darker in this area. Yeah, maybe something like that, like almost, I don't know, some kind of halo type effect. And now I'm going to do the same thing as before and basically just try and repaint this, but at a closer scale, so a larger scale, not closer scale, sorry. All right, so he's got like the cheek here. I'm noticing that there's a bit of light here, light for the nose, bottom of the chin, and this part's sort of in shadow. I think the clothing got way too dark, so I'm gonna alter that. And I kind of move between drawing with, oh boy, I keep forgetting what I'm going to say because I look at the thing and then I forget. Anyway, so I'm trying to get the values right. That's a main thing, is getting the values and trying to squint and observe, you know, what's what. I think this is pretty important, this straight line here. So I'm trying to get that. All right. Okay, so the hair is something that needs to be developed. I'm not thinking about any big details, but sort of big shapes. Like there is this shape like that I see. And I'm trying to get that. That's super important to me. So I will attempt to do that. Again, I'm not trying to be completely accurate because I'm going to change this quite a bit. But I do want to capture the mood, and that's like the most important thing, is capture sort of the mood or the personality of this person. And then in terms of, you know, any kind of details, like if I want to change the shirt color, for instance, I'm fine with doing that. You probably have to flip soon because I haven't flipped, so I'm gonna go ahead and do that. So I just have my flip canvas horizontal assigned to a shortcut key, and that just makes it faster to do things like flipping. And now I'm gonna put in a bit more of the values as I see them. Usually I actually go into drawing a lot sooner, but this time I thought maybe I'd get the big value blocking done just for people who are interested. I feel like it's kind of confusing. I get a lot of people who seem to want to know, well, how do I do a study? And I don't think there's a right way. I don't think I'm doing like, oh, this is the way you should do studies. I'm just trying to demonstrate that there are a bunch of different ways, but maybe these are some important things to keep in mind when you're doing your own study. So, okay. And if you're wondering why you do studies, well, it's really so you can learn about stuff. So for me, for instance, there are things that I would do from imagination and I might not understand, for instance, or I might not think of certain things, like skin tones. You know how, I don't know if you've had this, but you get the Crayola crayons and they have certain flesh tones that they call flesh tones. Some of them are called like flesh tone, and it's just like a peachy type color, and that's kind of what a lot of people go to when they think of skin tones, especially if you watched a lot of cartoons and that influenced you. Then you think of this type of skin tone color, or where shadows go. You know, there's a simplified position of certain shadows and things, and it's much more important, I think, to understand what things really look like, at least in the beginning, and then alter them. So, for instance, here I'm noticing, you know, the folds of the shirt, and that seems pretty important. And there's sort of a pattern to them. See this like zigzaggy thing? I'm trying to think about. I also think kind of like if I was designing this from scratch, what would I do if I was doing this from imagination? Try and carry over some of the ideas, like maybe the posing, thinking about things like that. And it's gotten to the point that with the current brush I'm using, it's a bit hard to get any details, and that's actually good. That's where you want to be. You want to be at the stage where it's not that easy to get any kind of detail, and then you can move in and put in more. So I'm gonna do that. I'm just gonna zoom in a few more stages, flip, and now see what's going on. Okay, so the first thing, and it's by virtue of being so zoomed out, but the first thing I notice is just how, I guess I'll just draw what I see, like how out this cheek comes, and it goes like that. So I'm gonna try and exaggerate that because I think it's pretty interesting. So what I'm gonna do is probably get more into like a drawing mode now, sort of slow down and get some of those details down. Okay, so there's an eye here. So I'm gonna make the eye bigger than I see because, as I said, I like to draw things in my style, and right now I draw eyes big and then noses and mouths a bit smaller. So I'm gonna do that, and then that's really, I feel like it's really interesting how the faces, how this eyebrow goes like very like an S shape here. See, it's got a very subtle thing, so what I'm doing is exaggerating that a bit, right? Okay, so get some of this hair, and it kind of goes in different ways. So I'm gonna maybe exaggerate that a bit too. There's some hair coming up from the side, and I've got this shape, and it's pretty subtle. Got like this bump, and then this bump. And what I'm gonna do is push this more out, and then push this more out, just to exaggerate that shape. And again, it's just, if you want to paint realistically, you don't have to do stuff like that. It's just optional. But the reason I'm doing it is because I really want to push these shapes a bit more. So there's like a shape here, and I'm going to push this out even more. And try and get this roundness showing in the cheeks. And there's a piece of hair here. Now, about this time, I'm going to start thinking about the whole picture and sort of where am I going to put my lights and darks, because I want the attention to be here, definitely. So I'm going to make the darkest dark. I can probably put that in right now. I'm going to make it like in this eye, right there. And I'm going to make the lightest light probably around his eye as well. So I'm going to take that, and it's not going to be white, but it's going to be lighter than most of the surrounding values. And let's get some highlight on the nose. I can start to sort of detail this. It's got a pretty interesting shape. Feels like those birds, the small that bird shape of seagulls and things. So gonna get that in, and then this mouth. Gonna exaggerate that a bit as well, but keeping it very small, and gonna shave down the side of the face. So I'm kind of treating it like a sculpture. Don't want to get too much into any kind of drawing in terms of lines. I'm trying to still stay pretty focused on bigger planes, and the way to do that really, or a very good way, is to keep your brush big and perhaps too big, in fact, to make any kind of detailed mark. So what I noticed here is, I just went way too much, but there's a very subtle shift in the values, and it's actually good to group your values as much as you can. So in this case, there's a bunch of different value, there's variations in the skin, but rather than put them all in at once, I'm going to try and simplify them to more basic light and dark. So for instance, I'll group all this into one value. Now I notice this under eye is a bit too dark, so I can lighten that up. Just add a bit of light. Now the mouth is very interesting, so I'm probably going to keep that much more similar to the reference, because I just find that very unique, and I suppose that's what I'm kind of going for with things. I'm altering the eye shape again according to my own stylistic choices, but I'm also trying to pay attention to the things I see. So, okay, it's a battle of, you change it a bit, but not completely, because you want to maintain the essential nature of the character. Especially if you're just starting out, it's not bad to just try to copy a photo directly. Can be pretty useful. But if you're at the stage where you're trying to interpret images more, and you're not going for an exact copy, and maybe you're just, you're used to drawing a certain way, and I think this applies especially to people who draw very simplified styles, like more anime-esque or cartoony, to use reference and to just see all the variations. I think this is something that's missing a lot, and it's something that I try with my work to capture different types of people, but I still need to do more. But it is something that I think, just having more variation is a good thing, as opposed to everything being just the same. And there's a very subtle highlight on the nose. It's really, really subtle, but I'm not getting it. It needs to be a bit brighter. And what I can do is can also put down my best guess and then use a color picker and see how far off I am. So let's say I feel like this is close to the right values. Well, I can check and see how far off. So I guess I can use this. So that's the value it's supposed to be. And this is the value mine is. So mine's way too dark. What about the cheek? That's that. And yeah, mine's way too dark. So I'm much too dark. So I'm going to pick the color. And I'm not going to color pick. I'm just going to try and adjust. And try and remember what I noticed. So, okay. Going too dark on things. So pay attention to that. All right, and I actually think some of this exaggeration kind of lost the mood of this kid, so I'm going to push it higher up instead of so wide like that. I'm going to push it a bit higher up. And it's got a bit more of a fatter face in the bottom. And something like that. All right. So I'm going to zoom in again. And my main focus is this area. Oops. This area. So pretty much most of my attention is going to go towards my focal point. And you can notice in the background just how loose it is. I don't care about that stuff too much, especially not right now. I think if there's any part I do care about, other than the face, it's probably the hand. So I'm going to just go ahead and draw that in. So I'm just going to get the basic shape, and then I'm kind of like drawing fingers a bit more chunky than they really are. So I'm kind of going to go ahead and do that. And then there's the other hand here. All right. So in terms of values, it gets pretty dark on this joint. And I tend to think of the fingers as kind of like joints. Like this part is one area, and then this part is another. The thumb lightens up quite a bit, and so does the palm actually. It's much lighter than some of the surrounding areas. And then the fingernails are pretty bright, so gotta get those in. All right. And this finger kind of screwed up on it, goes higher than the other one, and it stops about there, so this needs to be moved up, and this fingernail needs to be more like that. All right. Okay, this arm is back here, so we need a shadow like there for this part. And I'm just gonna try and pay attention to the thickness of this, the sleeve, because it's pretty thick. And same here, how kind of, okay, so you got the hand here, and then you've got this going over like that, and this hand sort of blocking the way, and it's got a highlight on it, so probably could have done that in one brush stroke, but okay. Now it's been a while since I flipped, so go ahead and flip. See how off I am, and usually I'm pretty damn off, and today's no exception. Alright, so one thing I feel like I'm missing is some of the darks are way too weak. So I'm gonna try and get some of that dark back. There's like a line here from the shirt, it goes down, and then this part is much darker right there, and there's like actually a design to this that I need to put down. So again, I'm gonna sculpt it out, and then there's like a part that goes up here, and there's a little indent here where the hair goes out like that, and then you gets this, and we get lighter right here. So I'm gonna get that, and again I'm gonna make it a bit more chunky, but it comes down, and it goes down like that, and it goes there. So again, make that more chunky than it is. All right, now this color thing is actually coming out a bit more, and again I kind of want to exaggerate that, so start getting in some of this patterning. Doesn't have to be exact, but just enough And I kind of feel like the face made it a bit too chubby there, and probably going to need to smooth some of these tones in pretty soon. And I'm thinking about the hair. Okay, so with the hair, there is a definite flow. So it kind of looks like it's going everywhere, but the way I see it, and it's kind of helpful to train yourself to see this as well, but there's like, I see like a spot here, and then this strand comes out, and it all sort of is leading towards this spot. It's kind of how I'm viewing it. There's like these big chunks of hair, and then this is kind of coming around. There's parts that switch direction, so here it's quite a mess actually. But overall, I kind of see this type of shape. So I'm going to try and build that. And the way I'm going to do that is by starting in this one spot and going outwards. And I'm not going to keep it perfect, but try and keep it close enough. And this isn't going to be photorealistic by any means. I only have like an hour and a half. For me anyway, there's no way I'm going to be painting photorealism in an hour and a half. Just some stuff. Okay. Gotta make sure I don't go too light with this. It's very, there's like a huge tendency when you see highlights in hair, and this probably comes from anime, to go really light, like these types of highlights. But they're, not even close to that. It's way darker. And so this piece of hair actually goes down the middle like this. I guess that's better. Just keep it that way. Get more of the forehead here. And I'm trying to think about the chunkiness of this brow ridge right now. Like right there, that's pretty chunky, and I think that's cool. So I'm gonna make it more like that. And actually he has pretty big eyebrows. So I'm gonna go ahead and exaggerate that. So with the style that I'm currently doing, it's kind of trying to combine all the different things I've learned over the years. So I've learned traditional painting, I've learned caricature, started to do more like an anime style, and there's also illustration stuff, and I'm trying to combine it all into one thing that is that has all the qualities of all those different things. And so what I get from caricature is like an exaggeration, but in a way that makes things look even more like the things, when you do it right, they look even more like the things that they're supposed to do. From drawing more like anime stuff, I get things that I feel look cool, and also that simplify I suppose simplify things, or maybe you could say minimize, because in a way sometimes I'm not simplifying, I'm just really minimizing it. And I think the difference between the two, if I was to explain it, which I'm sure eventually I'll have to explain it a bunch of times to people, but it's basically this, the way I see it. So I'm just making stuff up now, but hopefully it makes sense. So let's say you have a nose, right? And that nose looks like this. It's got a lot of little bumps, right? So to me, minimizing it would be doing something, or simplifying it would be sort of taking this and resolving it into that. Maybe this into this, and this into this, and then this, and maybe that. So that's sort of a simplified version, and maybe we add a bit more of that bump. But a minimized one is where I kind of still have all those markers, but they're just smaller, they're more subtle, they're reduced in impact, but they're still there. Actually, this needs to be more like that. This goes up. Okay, I didn't do a great example of this. I'm sorry. But it's basically, you don't lose things. Like with this, I kind of combine this and this into one thing. And you don't do that, you just let it be still there. So the information's still there, it's just dialed down. I mean, perhaps it would have been a better example to do like the classic anime face, because that's, you know, how you have, you know, let's say you have a real person and they're kind of, they've got like this thing and the mouth comes out and lots of little form turns, and you know, your nostril. In anime, you might just take this and do this, where you combine all this into one form, and maybe not even have like a nostril, whereas a minimization would be like you sort of get things more simple, but you still have little things that come out. Like for instance, there's like the bottom lip is kind of coming out further and stuff like that. You still get maybe the line of this. So anyway, that's this difference. Not done well, but whatever. Moving on. Okay, so at this point, I'm not like super satisfied with it, but I feel like it's getting there. So what I'm gonna do is hit Shift Control Alt E, and what that does is it just makes a duplicate of all the layers but merged into one. So now I have like this image, and now what I can do, because it's all on one layer, is I can smudge it if I want and smooth out tones, but it's also kind of more like you've got a backup of before it was screwed up in case you screw it up. So that's always useful. So I'm just gonna Control J, and that just duplicates the layer. Now I can put in some more information. Like this is way too dark. This part of the sweater thing is too dark, so gotta lighten that. And then it gets darker. And trying to keep like a softness in this. I think that's really important, especially for this image, because you have to think what's the point? What are you trying to convey? And when I see this, I kind of feel like, well, you know, there's this young kid and seems to have a kind of concerned expression, but overall it's a kind of a softer image. Like the things I'm going for are much softer, so I'm gonna aim for that. Now there is this dark line right here, the shadow, that goes like this, and then it goes like this, and it casts a shadow. What I feel like is it's fine, but if I make it as dark as in the reference, it's drawing too much attention down here. So I'm actually gonna pick this tone for the shadow, and I'm gonna use that so that it's not as dark as it is in reality, in the reference. And that's just a decision that I'm making so that I can maintain my focal point. And these are things you have to do to, you know, you have to make these kinds of decisions of where do you want the person to look. And that's why I think doing just a straight up photo study of something is maybe not so helpful, because you lose some of the choices that you could make. Like, okay, make this doesn't have to be that dark or light, or you don't have to faithfully copy the thing perfectly, because what's more important than the thing looking like the thing is that whatever message you have gets across, whatever feeling you want conveyed gets across. That's much more important, in my opinion anyway, than something looking correct. Mind you, I did talk about how people should slow down and stuff, but that's not just for, make it look correct. That's more, as I said, make sure you're drawing exactly what you want to be drawing. And see, right now I'm kind of flattening things out too much. I don't like that. So one of the reasons things tend to look flat is you don't have a good transition of values as things turn. So I kind of know though that if I smudge it a bit, I'm gonna get some of that, and that's gonna bring back some roundness. But I'm also losing some overall value. So what I'm gonna do is take a big soft brush and I'm gonna paint in the form. See how there's like a shoulder here that you can't really see it, but you can feel it under there. I'm just gonna use my shadows to build back those subtle changes so that I get a bit more roundness in this, especially down here. And actually I don't mind that all this goes into shadow. I think that actually looks a bit better. So I'm gonna let this go even darker than it is. And to counter it, I'm actually gonna increase the light around his face. So at this point, I'm gonna put like a fake light right here. I mean, it's kind of there anyway, but I'm gonna make it even more intense. And that's gonna help to push this face forward. So we really look at this face. So that's gonna be my big bright spot, and then I'll lighten up the eyes as well. And then kind of let this fade off. So I start with the brightest spot right beside the cheek, and then I kind of blend it out, so it doesn't matter so much, because I don't want it to be as bright here as it is here. Because if I do that, let's say I make it super bright here, now all of this is taking your attention instead of just like there. But if I put it brighter here and then sort of fade off, then you're looking more here. And that's obviously too bright, but maybe what I currently have is a bit too dark. There's always like a push and a pull when it comes to values, and you have to think about your range, like how far do I want to go, how light do I want to go, how dark do I want to go, and that's gonna influence a lot of things. Okay, so now I've got this basic general hair shape, and if I just darken certain parts, I can suggest that there's a lot of hair, but I'm not drawing like individual hair strands so much because my brush is still like this thick, right? If I want to draw hair strands, I have to be going super thin like that at least. But by just putting in certain shadow shapes, it gets the feeling across of like, oh, there's lots of hair here and here. And then there's a bunch of wispy things around, which I gotta save that till the end. I can easily put, a lot of extra random strokes and things, but it's best to do that once you've got the big picture stuff down. And this is probably, it would be good to have some light here. So now I've actually started deviating from the value structure, and that's because I decided I want it to be a bit darker down here and a bit brighter up here. So deviated a bit, but it's intentional, and that's really important. Whatever you do, make sure you're doing it for a good reason. I think it's very important to be able to justify yourself when you're doing artwork, for instance. Not that people should be, telling you, oh, you can't do this or whatever, but, or, if someone says, why are you doing this? You shouldn't do this. I don't mean justification like that, but I mean in terms of decision-making processes. So for instance, if someone says, why did you make that value dark like that? That doesn't look like the reference. I think it's important to be able to say, well, I did it that way because I felt it was getting too contrasty, and I wanted the viewer to be able to look more at the focal point and get the idea. That, I think, is a good reason. A bad reason is just, I thought I got it right. mind you, if you were aiming for that, you don't want to use that as an excuse. Like, just, why is this off? Oh, it's supposed to be that way. Okay. And I think this part of the clothing is very interesting to me. You end up, when you paint, and I haven't been painting that much really at all these days, but when you do paint, you kind of get into these weird, obscure things, like just like shapes. Like I really like how this shape goes. I think that's interesting. So now I'm kind of disproportionately interested in that. Getting the thing to come forward, see, like that, which I think kind of starting to come forward. Same with this part, like this goes behind and this part of the color is actually coming forward. So I've got to get that feeling, which, yeah, now it's there much more. Okay, and I figure now is probably can start smoothing out some of these tones. Now I notice actually in his face it's kind of rough, so I might have to go back and actually add some roughness back to it. And I'm mostly, again, I'm focused on the face. I don't really care that much about all the, the folds and things. But this part is really important that I get it right. For the mouth, I'm probably going to lighten the values more than they need to be because I want this soft feeling to come through. And there's a highlight on the lower lip that I find really interesting. So things like that are very important for me to get right. And in the image, it's kind of looking off to the side. I think I'll maintain that, but I'm not 100% sure. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and switch to the painting brush. So far I've just been using the 24 pixel spatter brush. Let's go ahead and make the eyes brighter, but kind of hesitant to make them over bright. I kind of like how it's a bit in shadow. It feels more like the mood I would want to get across. So I actually might make them darker than they should be, just for effect. So now I'm gonna zoom in quite a bit more so I can get some more detail going. Okay, so there's a lot with the face that's off in mind that I have to correct. A lot of things like the values, the planes, stuff like that's really off. So I need to, but I also have to think about, well, do I like what I've got better? Because in some ways I kind of like this. I mean, no offense to the kid, I think he's just fine, but based on how I try and do things, I think I don't mind kind of changing it a bit, and I think it's perfectly fine. In fact, I think it's in some ways it's expected as an artist to not stay 100% accurate to the thing, but rather find your own voice or find what's interesting to you and bring that out, or use the reference as a starting off point, and then you can go further. Because the thing is, the more realistic I go, at some point it's going to start to demand that I keep going further and further into realism. So I'm probably going to stop at this point in terms of getting too accurate, because otherwise I'm going to have to fix everything and make it all super, super real, and kind of defeats the purpose for me right now. I'm going to think about how I can perhaps take this out of a realistic study now and into more of a stylized thing. So, but I do want to maintain that one highlight. There's one on the nose, and then there's one on the lower lip, like right there. I think that's pretty important. So I'm going to put that in and put that in. And I also like this this gradient in the eye. I think that's really cool how it gets dark at the top and then kind of have it, because that's all in shadow, and then you have like this light coming down here. And then you've got like the tiniest highlights just there and there. And with these kinds of things, it's okay to just suggest them. Like, you might not even see them from far, and that's okay. I think that's completely fine. So a thing that's going on with this guy is his eyes are kind of doing this, but I feel this is more intense if I keep it lower, so I'm kind of changing it. To suit what I want. And then there's a highlight right here, which is pretty important, I feel, especially to get the feel of him. Get these highlights here. And for a learning thing, you know, in terms of like, well, do studies, you're supposed to learn stuff. That's something I can keep in mind. Okay, there's that, like these highlights that can be pretty intense right there. It's not something I would necessarily have thought about. Okay, so I've made the nose too defined, especially in this part. So I'm gonna go ahead, simplify that. And then get back some of these highlights. I feel like it got a bit too dark in this area. So I'll use a bigger brush, just lay down some value here, and then a bit here. And you get some sort of under the nose. And a bit there. Actually, the nose needs to be even brighter still. Alright, I think I'm gonna move to coloring soon, because I've got like a basic value block in already. Here I just have to make sure I get the shape of this nose. So a value change indicates a form change, and so I have to make sure these values are in the right spot, or it's going to look wrong. Very serious. So with this part of the under eye, what's really important to me is maintaining the roundness of the eyeball form. I think it's pretty essential to get right. But I'm kind of losing some of what I had before as well, so I don't like that. Okay, that's still okay. And then you've got bone, like right here, like of the cheekbone. And I have to think about how much I want to have that showing. Okay, so just get this highlight a bit brighter on the nose right there. And get a bit more dark in the mouth, especially in the corners. Something like that. And get this to read more, this shadow underneath to read more, and this has to be brighter. Yeah. See, with the highlights, it's super important, because if I put a highlight here, it means the form is one way, and if I put it here, it means it's another way, so I have to really think. And for him, he's kind of got it there, but the thing is, I kind of want to push it a bit, so I might not do that. And I'm also going to shrink the chin just a touch, just to give it more of a, I don't know how to describe it, maybe cute or something, I don't know, expression. All right, let's start thinking about color. All right, let's turn off this layer, and this one has no color anyway, so that's fine. And let's quickly flip. So I might have to do some adjustments. It actually has an ear. Didn't even see in the values stage, so get that in. And this part's okay. Kind of want to design some of these hairs a bit more. And possibly change this to be a bit sharper. And then he's got these two wispy ones coming out. And this possibly can be designed more like this. I'm going to keep this a bit rougher, especially at the top, just to get more more brushiness in here. Get a few more shadows here. Get that to read. Comes around. Then you have this pattern on the shirt, which I think is kind of important in this part. And the hands need to read more, need to be more literate. You ain't reading enough. And this thumb, where it touches the other finger right there, that's an important part to get dark, because that's going to be where you get an occlusion shadow. Whenever you have two parts touching or overlapping, it's a good idea to put in your occlusion shadows so they feel like they're touching things. All right, gets a bit darker here. And I can go ahead and just add a bit of a light around, change the values just so I show this hand as just so it gets a bit more contrast. And with the shapes now, I am actually simplifying them instead of just minimizing them. Okay, so this comes around like that. This goes in like that. Okay. so when you're trying to get, things to be defined, like the hand in this case, you have lines as a way of defining things, right? Like I outline it, but then you have to remember that there aren't really lines around here, so you've got to, in reality, there's not lines. So the reason I'm doing this thing where I take, what I'm doing right now, right? Like I get a line, then I sort of fade it off, is so that this is a tone. It's not a line. Because we're working with tones here, not lines necessarily. Okay? I'll get some of this. Just sort of blending some of these things together. And then down here, I have to let it actually lose some detail, and I can actually lose even more than what I've already done and let this sort of fade off into nothing. It's actually okay. Creates this artsy type look, and what I could do, in fact, I think, is crop it differently. Maybe increase this. It depends. So I'm just looking at it as like, am I conveying what I want? I'll leave it for now. Okay. Oh, and his arm is on his jeans, so it's probably important to get some light to indicate, his pants. All right. Color time. Figure what I can start with is a gradient map to see if I can find something. I guess that's the closest. That'll do. All right, and then gonna use a hue saturation slider and see if I can't get it a bit more warm, especially in the face. I feel like a bit warmer would be good. Okay, and I want that mostly in the face, so what I'm gonna do is actually, I prefer that, put on a mask and just paint out the parts that are supposed to be cooler. So for instance, his hair is a bit cooler in temperature, not in like coolness, but temperature. So I'm gonna let that get a bit colder, and same with the clothing and the background too. And let it be a bit more cool. And then I'm gonna make a new layer and set it to color. And now I'm just gonna basically put in some colors. I kind of hate these colors of the sweater and things, so I'm not sure how I'm gonna work with those. But what I'm gonna mostly be working on is the light areas. So getting the color in the light to be more like what it is in the reference. And again, kind of using bigger brushes and stuff. At this point, it's not super important that it's all accurate. It's more about just getting the bigger idea, and then I can adjust it anyway. Like with this hair, if it needs to get a bit more grayed out, I can go ahead and do that. There are certain like grayer areas on the side of the face and things that I can work on. And then in terms of color for the shirt, okay, let's just try and start with more of a muddy tone. like a mustardy color. And it's okay. And keep your sweater. I'm not sure about the shirt inside, but all right, and then can actually go a lot less saturated for the background area. Kind of like some of that green near the face, so I might keep that. And then there's a lot of warmth that we need in the, let's put that in the hair as well. There's a lot of warmth we need in the face that's kind of not there anymore, so gotta get that back. Okay, so let's just take the skin color and warm it up, saturate it. Put that, certain areas, like it gets pretty warm around here. It's pretty warm up here. There's like a turning here, so let's warm that up. Here. And then the lights are a bit cooler than what I have, so I'm gonna have to adjust those two. So this isn't like getting the colors perfect at all. This is just getting the colors closer. Okay, so for this inside part, everything's sort of yellowy, so I'm thinking maybe stick with that so it's at least a bit coordinated. Not sure though. Trying to think what's gonna offset it. Actually, if his face is reddish, maybe sticking with some kinds of greens could be the answer. Yeah, something more like that maybe will work. All right. And then you have to cool down his eyeballs because those are much too hot. So when you think of things like white, especially like white in the eyes and stuff, it's sometimes more important to think in terms of desaturated, like it's more grayed out than necessarily super white. All right, now all these colors are definitely going to need to be adjusted, but this is a starting point. So now I go ahead and I duplicate that layer, and now I can do stuff with it. So one of the things I like to do after I get the colors down is take a big soft brush and kind of blend things. This is, depends. I mean, you don't have to do this. In fact, some people would actually dislike this stage because it gets rid of too much detail. For me personally, I don't mind, kind of like these soft, especially with the background. I don't mind if it's soft. Sometimes I like it more rough, but for the sake of this image, because as I mentioned, it's sort of like a more soft feel. I think it's not necessarily inappropriate to keep things a bit softer. But if you don't like that and you want to be a bit more rough and show a bit more of your brush strokes, that's totally fine. Do what you like. That's the whole point of being an artist, is to create what you want to see, bring that into the world. Alright, and then maybe some of this can get blended. Now you'll see once the colors are in and I start to soften things, they get a lot more complicated than when it was just black and white. That's because you've got all these subtle hue shifts happening now. You've got little color changes that really, they make things look a lot more interesting, especially when I get to the face. Start to put some of these together, you can start to notice new colors emerge as like two colors mix. And It's always cool. But yeah, just getting the big ideas. With hair especially, I like to keep it soft. It's just something I think looks cool. And when you get further into the background as well, I like to soften that. So it starts to just feel like it's more in the distance. And I can probably do that with the sweater here, you know, let it get softer. All right, so now I have to go back to actually painting. So these color things, they're just a in-between stage. It's just to get rid of a lot of the black and white stuff and establish some basic values, but you're still gonna have to go in and put more information. And you know, at this point, you can spend many hours working on all the little subtle changes that you need to put in the image. So it's just time at this point. There's a ton of time involved. And now that there's more color, I can actually see more detail when things are in color. So I'm gonna go ahead and start painting again. But now I'm going to be dealing with color as well as value. So I noticed with the lips, for instance, they get pretty warm right there. See how warm that gets? And I really like that. So I'm going to try and get that back. Put some warmer tones in here. And cool down the highlight quite a bit. There's like a highlight here. Make that more cool. And also on the lip it gets a bit cooler. And on this part of the lip gets a bit warmer. That's too warm. So gotta adjust it again. And this part is a bit too dark, and it's actually not that cool. Okay, like it's cool, but it's not that cool. Now just blending some of this together. So this part is much warmer than what I have, so I've got to go ahead and adjust some of that. And I'm picking a lot of the colors I have already and then working with those. It's much easier to do that, I feel. And just use what you already have, as opposed to going way too crazy with trying to find the color from scratch. That can be really tough. And I'm also, I don't know if you noticed, but I'm kind of following the forms as I put them in. Like with these, I'm kind of going around. So with the nose, it kind of fades off here. I gotta get that in. And it's softer on this side. And it gets pretty warm as you go around. So there's like a warmth that shows up around the nostrils. I'll get that in. And also here. And yeah, here gets pretty, it's actually quite hot in terms of temperature. And then this is really bright, but again, I don't want it to be that bright. It feels almost too on the nose if I do it that bright, so. But this highlight needs to be cool down, definitely. And you can go ahead and put in some detail there. There's another thing that happens when you're doing photo studies, and it's that when you're doing it, you can see all the things that you're getting wrong because you have the reference right there, and it's like, well, that's not that color, that's not that color, stuff like that. But so long as you keep your mood correct, no one's going to really know that when they look at the image. They're going to be viewing it much more on like, how does this make them feel? And so it's, in a way, it's much less important that you get the image to look perfectly representational, unless you're just doing it as a pure study of values or something. It's much more important that you get the feeling down, because that's what people notice in the end is really the feeling, not that, oh, okay, you know, well, this value is too light, or this color is too cool or too warm. So yeah. Do you notice this blue right in the corner, like right on this rim of the eye? And it's actually something that happens quite often with eyes, and it's a pretty cool thing to include. Again, I'm kind of changing the eye shape, so, but I will put in some of that blue because it's cool. There. And I am exaggerating it, but that's fine. Also exaggerating those highlights. Get some of that blue in there. All right. So when I squint, I see some of the values are off. So I'm going to go ahead and throw on a luminosity layer just so I can make some changes to the values using a soft brush. So this is just gonna be, actually I can just put on this, and can do that with this as well. Just put a white layer, set it to color, and then using a pretty big soft brush. Like, the face is way too dark. I already saw that for quite a while, but I was hoping it wasn't so bad, but it is. It's terrible. All right. I'm just going to go ahead and lighten that a bit. See, with the luminosity layer, what's happening is it's only changing the value, not the color. And that means the color will actually need to be changed because it will shift. When you shift a value and a color, if you're not changing temperature at the same time, it'll be wrong. So. Oddly enough, I liked it better before. Gonna maybe only make it a bit different because I kind of like it this way. I'm gonna make this part brighter. Even then, kind of like it as it is. Maybe I'll just do that. Maybe I won't even go that far. Add a little bit of light, because I guess when I go back and forth, I prefer it a bit dark, and I suppose if it looks fine, then just stick with it. All right, let's see. Yeah, it should be enough. But yeah, you can see how it sort of deadens the color when you do that. So whenever you do that, you have to go ahead and fix the colors again, which is frustrating. Which is why it's really important to get your values right the first time, because you don't want to be spending all your time adjusting your colors over and over again. All right. So, how much time do we have? We got about 10 minutes left. Let's see what we can do. I should probably throw on a color balance layer soon to get the colors working together. It's kind of, I suppose one could argue it's not that good to be relying on it because, it means your colors are off. Because when you use traditional, for instance, you can't just color balance it. But the thing with traditional, especially mixing paints, is that you're using paints that are, because you're using paints that are getting mixed, they tend to always be in harmony. Whereas when you're working digitally, you have a much higher chance of getting things so they're out of the right range in terms of color and things. So alright, better get those fingernails a bit better because they actually have a bit of warmth around them. Yeah, it's too much. Go ahead and tone that down. And then the nail itself is actually cooler than what I had. Alright, and then this part is a bit more pinky. Even though it's a thumb, it's more pinky. And it actually gets pretty warm right there as it transitions. Yeah, sorry, I'm not talking much. I have a really hard time painting and talking at the same time. It's tough. Let me know if this is something you like. I guess for the patrons who suggested it. It is my first time doing it, so I don't know. Like maybe this is terrible and you don't want to see this anymore. And so, feel free to let me know, and then I'll go back to doing the podcasts, or maybe I'll do the podcasts every other month or something. And yeah. All right, so this part of the shirt actually comes forward, so I want to make this a much harder edge than it is right now, so I actually have to make this more crispy. So one of the ways of doing that is you just darken some of the areas. So see that, like that now comes forward, and that's something that want to happen in this case. But this part should not be all messy, because it gets too much attention. It should be quite soft, but this part can actually warm it up a little bit here. So I'm adding colors not really based on what's there, more just like what I feel looks cool, and that's very subjective when you're thinking about what looks cool. It's just what looks cool to you might look like shit to someone else, which is why it's important to trust yourself, I guess. Because even if things look really bad in terms of, well, this doesn't look like the photo at all, I bet if I showed people this without the photo, they would be fine with it. And I have to just remember things like that. It's okay to sort of indulge in what you, in your alterations, because, you know, it's kind of what the point of creation is. Otherwise, I should just send someone this photo and say, hey, here's a really cool photo I saw online. So that ear, I need to work a bit on the ear just to show that it is an ear. There's an ear back here. And it does have a unique shape to it, so it's kind of important. But at the same time, it's not that bright, so I can let the hair cover it and sort of keep it in the background. Just that it is there, you do feel it, that being there. And then here, the hair comes around like so. Probably cool this down a touch. Highlight right here. And bring some darks back in the hair here. And then there's some warm shadows in the mouth. I usually make the corners of the mouth much warmer than they actually are. It's just personal taste again. I think it looks cool. It looks cool, but it's warm. And let's go ahead and strengthen that shadow so it reads as a cast shadow, because right now the transition's a bit soft, and that's fine if you're doing a form shadow, but it's a cast shadow, so it shouldn't be so soft. All right. Okay. So I've got about a couple minutes left, which really isn't enough time to do much more major stuff to it. So I'll just go ahead and, you know, alter some of the color balance and, you know, some finishing things. So right now, I'm not happy with it at all. I feel like it's an awful failure. But that's usually how I feel whenever I finish my pieces. So that's nothing new. I have to fight against that and hope that it's not as bad as it looks to me, because it looks really, really bad. Yeah, go away. All right. Get some. Okay, so let's put in color balance. And I'm gonna warm up the shadows quite a bit. Not that much. More like that. And then I'm gonna cool down the lights. And I think the eyes are too close together. Like, that's just a big problem. So I'm gonna have to fix that. I just noticed it. And it sucks how you get tunnel vision. Usually when I paint, what I do, well, when I used to paint, I would take big breaks. Or not big breaks, but breaks often. You need your eyes to rest so that you're not staring at the image for so long, because it can screw you up. I'm gonna select the face and just move that eye with the liquify tool. And move it over a bit, kind of like that, and then shrink this eye. Actually move that in a bit more, maybe. Just alter it, make it a bit more. Like that. Let's see before and after. Yeah, it looks a bit more human now. All right, so we've got our color balance. I guess I'll throw on some noise. This gray layer, filter noise, add noise. Keep it uniform, not monochromatic. Now I hit Control A, Control T, and make that bigger so I can actually see the grain. Change it to soft light and to about 10%. And now there's a bit of grain to everything. So what that does, I can even add more, but what it does is it sort of brings the image together, especially if you have a lot of different kinds of brush strokes. Feels more like one thing. I am pretty meh about this one. I feel like maybe an overlay layer might help, because I feel like there's not enough focus here, and it feels dead in the face. So I'm gonna try and save it using whatever bullshit means I can. So one way of doing that is you can use like overlay, sort of guide the eye around the image. So this looks super intense, but I'm going to tone it down by a lot. So just something like that. Yeah, it brings more attention here, but still hate it. Sorry about this. I don't know. Oh boy. Well, hopefully it wasn't a complete waste. I hope you learned something at least. So that's a thing. Hoped it helped, and thanks for watching.